Matthew chapter 7 is a masterpiece of wisdom, like the book of Proverbs. But like the book of Proverbs, it feels disjointed. You'll have a mic drop moment here right next to another mic drop moment, but they're not playing the same tune. Why is it that Matthew 7 has such incredible wisdom? For example, it has this: do not judge or you will be judged. Yeah, that's really important. And then a few verses later, you read this: do unto others as you would have others do unto you. That's the golden rule, and that is a golden nugget. And then you have this: ask and you'll receive, seek, you'll find, knock and the door will be open to you. For whatever you ask in prayer, God will give you. Huge idea. And it ends with another big idea. We've turned it into a children's song, but there's nothing childish about it. The wise man built his house upon the rock. That actually ties back to the very beginning of the sermon when Jesus presented himself as the very Torah of God, the Word of God, upon which you build your life. So the sermon is bracketed by this claim that Jesus is the Word of God, and them's fighting words for Pharisees. So all this chapter is just mic drop moment and golden nugget, one right after another, but there doesn't seem to be a through line. Why? I've got an idea, I can't prove it. Of course, then you can't prove me wrong. So here we go. I've watched my own students take notes over the years. And at the beginning of the lecture, man, they're writing everything down and it's all organized. And then they get a little tired and they write a few less things down. And it's a little more disjointed. But by the time it's at the end of a class, say a 2 or maybe 3 hour lecture class, they're just kind of dazed and writing down just what they can catch. That is exactly what Matthew chapter 7 looks like to me, which means I think we actually have the handwritten notes of Matthew in this long sermon that Jesus preached. Now, the sermon itself only takes 18 minutes to recite, but you know it was longer than that. Because if you're traveling half a day to hear a speaker, you're gonna want more than 18 minutes. I'm gonna guess it was 3 hours. So by the end of the 3 hours, Matthew's hand is cramping and he's only getting the biggest of the ideas and dropping them in without context. I think that's what we have. Maybe missing some of the connective tissue of Jesus' speech. But regardless of that, this is a masterpiece. And I want you to notice this, at the very end of the sermon, this is not part of the sermon, it's the end of the sermon, verse 28 and 29. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as one of the teachers of the law. Now, I want to point out 2 things about this passage that might be new to you. This sentence, when Jesus had finished saying these things, that sentence is repeated 5 times in the book of Matthew. Each of them follow a major sermon in Matthew. In other words, Matthew has 5 recorded sermons of Jesus, just like the Old Testament began with the 5 books of the law. That is interesting. What's even more interesting to me is in Jesus' day, the honor was seen as a limited resource, like oil or like water. And so if I have more honor, I have to take it from someone. And Jesus took it from the other leaders. How? Because the crowds are coming out to hear him, not them. And when it says that the crowds were amazed at Jesus' teaching, it is always the crowds that determine who wins the contest for honor. And so all 5 times that Jesus spoke, the crowds just went, wow, he is the real teacher. And that explains how a carpenter rose to prominence even with the Sanhedrin. And that is something worth talking about.